Welcome to Tackle Fanatics TV, and in this episode of TFTV you get a chance to check out Korda's Session Victim number 8.
If you watch my Session Victim series on the website, you'll know that I came over to Gigantica with part carp, part man Simon Scott in May of this year to hopefully get a female that was ready to lay some eggs, get some males that were ready to fertilise those eggs and make some babies. We didn't need to do that. When we arrived, the fish spawned that night. Simon ended up fishing in a swim where the fish were actually spawning. He wound in the morning after no sleep with the bobbins going mad and wound in with eggs all up his line. We then proceeded to harvest those eggs. Being the scientist that he is, he could check that they were fertilised, and we just spread them between the two nursery ponds behind me and let nature take its course, as it were. We'd already spiked them with little tiny freshwater plankton called rotifer and also with daphnia. They ate all of those really quickly. We carried on feeding them with pellet all the way through the summer, but we couldn't really see what was in there. It was pea green, the water. We'd throw the pellets in and you get a bait ball come up, we'd scoop a few up, and there'll be various sizes of fish, but we didn't really know what we had. So the idea was to come back in November when the water had cooled down, drop these two nursery ponds down, see what we had in there, grade the fish out, and then put the biggest ones together, the next biggest together, and then the smallest ones in our third pond. But before we did that, that third pond had to be netted. It had 5 carp left in it, which we'd been putting in there out of the main lake because they weren't really big enough, sort of 18, 19 pounders. And we knew there were a lot of roach in that stock pond as well. So we wanted to clear it completely, start with a blank canvas, so we knew that all the food we put in there would be eaten by the carp. So that was a real experience. I've never netted a lake before and it is blooming hard work. We did it in the pouring rain as well, which didn't make it any easier. We got 4 of the 5 carp on the first drag, fish between, I think it was 18 and 24 pounds, and we got the final carp on the second drag. They all went back into the main lake, and I'm sure people will be catching them in the months to come. Got loads of roach out as well, and most importantly, a load of pike. The roach we just donated to a local person, and the pike went back into the main lake to try and keep the small fish down in the main lake, because if you have an explosion of roach and small carp, they eat some of the food that the big carp could eat and the weights may drop. So it's always good to have a few predators in your main carp fishery. So with that one completely empty, we set about draining these down, and that was not an easy task. We've got standpipes in there, but we didn't know exactly how much water would go out of them if we pulled them out. We didn't know where the joins were because other people had done the work in the past. So we had to siphon the water out. But fortunately, a good friend of mine, Andrew Gibbons, who's massively into garden ponds, he's got huge koi in his own pond. He's bought all the equipment on our behalf, and you can see running away from me there's some great big pipes that are actually used for swimming pools. These are pumping the water into the nursery ponds now, but we used them at the time to siphon the water out of the nursery ponds, drop the level as much as we could, and then we were charging round in the real shallow water, catching the fish and grading them into a couple of swimming pools, and basically put the A team in one and all the others in another. And that was no mean feat. We were bucketing water out of them in the end, pouring it down the standpipes to get them down to absolutely nothing, because again, we didn't want to leave any fish in there, because if we did, they would eat the food that the bigger ones could eat. It would upset how much we were feeding them, and we wouldn't get the growth rates that we really want. Once we've graded them into the ponds, it was time then to split them down into their respective groups and put them back into the nursery ponds. So amazingly, we took a fish from an egg at the end of May to 22 ounces at the end of October, beginning of November, and that was with no real idea what was in those ponds. There were thousands of tiny little carp which are never going to do anything, which we had to dispose of, unfortunately. That is the reality of fish farming, but we had some absolute freaks, and this one that we've nicknamed Orange Spot, it was the biggest one in there by some margin. The next best was probably 16, 17 ounces, so just about a pound. There were quite a few in that range, and some real angry bruisers of fish. Great big shoulders, really deep bodies. They just look like miniature 80-pounders. And they are probably babies of fudgies and fish like that out in the main lake. So it was amazing to have a crop of fish that were the real freaks. They're the real aggressive feeders. They're the ones that hatch first. They predate on the other fish that are smaller than them to begin with. They get onto the natural food first. And I'm told that always happens in a pond like that. You get the real freaks, the real aggressive ones that hatch first. They eat everything and the others don't really get a look in. So no matter how much food we were putting in those ponds, the freaks were getting most of it, and that's why we ended up with so many tiny fish. So that was the top 50. That was for a total weight of 14 pounds, and we're feeding them 2% of their body weight a day, which I think roughly equates to about 4.5 ounces a day at the moment. And as long as the water temperature is above 10 degrees, we will carry on feeding them over the winter, perhaps once a week, just to keep their health in the right condition. But because the fish don't metabolise the food under 10 degrees, you can throw loads of food in and they don't really get any nutrition from it. So basically you're wasting your money. As soon as the water goes above 10 degrees again in the spring, we'll be feeding them 2% a day, and we can up that to 4% a day when the water gets above 20 degrees. So from June onwards, right the way through the summer, we can feed them 4% a day. Then in the second pond was the next best 100, the B team, and that was for a total weight of 6.5 pounds. So I think they worked out to sort of a third of an ounce each. Lovely fish, loads of little fully scaled and like zipline ears, loads of high back commons, sparsely scaled mirrors. We've got a real mix because there were so many mum and dads out in the main lake making these eggs and fertilising them. We've got a real nice mix, which is brilliant. So in a couple of years' time, there'll be 100 fish going back into the main lake as a minimum. We expect fish like orange spot in the A team to go from 22 ounces to maybe 10 pounds if we're really lucky this time next year. And then a year after that, who knows, it might be an upper double, it might even be a 20 pounder. So obviously the A team, the whole 50 are going to go in there. The next best 50 from pond B are going to go in with them. And then in the final pond, we've put the 800 next best fish. Like I say, we had to dispose of thousands of tiny little carp because we had far too many, but if you keep them all, they don't grow and they never get anywhere. And the idea is always that they go back in the main lake. We've not had to bring any fish on site, so there's no risk of disease. We trickle them in over a few years and it ups the run rate on the main lake. And not only will you be catching the new fish, but you'll be catching the original ones because there's more competition for food. It makes them feed that bit harder and makes the place a bit easier, but it's still got loads of big ones in it. And then the idea is once we've split the fish out of the main two ponds, A and B, then we'll grade those fish in the bottom pond again. The best 50 will go in one, the next best 100 will go in another, and the rest will stay in there. So we've got fish for the next few years, a constant conveyor belt coming that's going to go into the main lake. So I'm hoping in sort of 5 or 6 years' time, there might be 300 or 400 extra fish in the main lake, which is really going to transform the run rate. And all that is possible because Andrew knows so much about keeping fish in ponds. We're using that technology. We're pumping water in from the main lake, so we've got pure water coming in all the time. We've got a fantastic aeration system that is designed, an air pump, so there's oxygen going into the water all the time. If the fish get loads of oxygen, loads of clean water and loads of food, they're going to grow absolutely massive. So a huge thank you to the whole team that have been here. Mark Bryant's been an absolute godsend. His fishing partner Ginge has been an absolute godsend, who we've nicknamed Electro because he got everything working. My mate Co's been brilliant, Apache as well. You know, everybody's worked their absolute socks off. You know, obviously Andrew for bringing all the equipment over and basically getting it all set up. Without that A team, we wouldn't have made this possible. And I really hope in a couple of years' time we've got some absolute monsters to show you that we've grown from nothing.
You've been tuned into TFTV. Tackle Fanatics stock an extensive range of Korda products at the best prices around. We'll stock a vast selection of end tackle from all the leading manufacturers. To view our range, log on to www.tacklefanatics.co.uk. Remember, Tackle Fanatics offer finance to make your tackle purchase more affordable. Tight lines and wet nets from everybody at TFTV.